our estimates for new construction significantly. And so then we also did reduce the contingency in there. The contingency for the new schools was 16%. We reduced that down to 11, took out 5% of that. But we did increase the square footage because of the benchmarking information that we had.
Thank you.
As a follow-up to one of the things I think he asked about was the things that have been moved, I guess, to general fund funding or out of the scope of this bond program. So I seem to recall from a time back that the two-way radio system was really quite a high priority of need for the school system. And so is that still a high priority to fund that right away, or is this mean a delay?
No, we won't have a delay to that. I mean, as soon as we have a definitive plan as to what we're going to purchase, I anticipate us moving forward on that.
Okay. What other questions do we have?
I have a few questions and comments here. Now, what I wanted to do was just basically take a step back, and I know we've had a few moving numbers in the past few weeks, and I wanted to get a gauge of where we're at going forward here. So I've got a few questions and comments. The Fort Bend ISD capital plan shows a total of almost $108 million currently available for funding projects, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Then, do I understand this correctly that if we decided not to have a bond referendum until next May, or if a bond referendum were held this November but failed, could we still use that $108 million on capital projects for this upcoming year?
Yes, there would, yes, the answer is yes. I think the board would have to consider possible action to redirect funds from the 2007 bond that were designated for the middle school to perhaps build another school or do some of the work that's requested in this, that's been prioritized.
Okay. In the Fort Bend ISD, the 2014 capital plan, phase 1, that was drafted in July, we initially presented a 3-phase plan with a total potential bond need of about $380 million for the first phase, correct? Is that what we had initially?
Correct.
So a month ago, we were comfortable with being under $400 million. I understand that a month ago, it was obviously $380 million, which is under $400 million. Regarding the last bond referendum in 2007, it was $428 million, and it passed with like a 65% vote. And I went back and I did some research, and I found some of these items, so we can help navigate going forward. And some of the brochures back in 2007, and actually 2007, the enrollment was expected to reach 75,000 by 2010. And obviously, enrollment today is around 71,000. The brochure also stated that enrollment would be near 85,000 by 2023. Okay. I hope we all understand and appreciate my concern, but the amount of the 2014 bond we're proposing, particularly since we still have $97 million remaining for the past bond referendum. We all want to support the package. I want to support the package, but I want, more importantly, the voters to approve this. I know we're in a different place now, but I personally liked the three-phase plan. I like the lower amount first, and as we go, we ask for more money. Dr. Dupree, back in 2003, when the bond election failed, is there anything that we can bring from that experience in today's time, something that we could have done differently? Or
Yes, there is. We can listen to the community in terms of pricing the projects appropriately. In 2003, that was the big issue. Even our own Economic Development Council opposed the bond at that point. because they felt as if the district was not responsive to pricing the projects in a conservative, fair manner. This time, we've actually learned from that, and we've addressed that in this, and that's why the Bond Oversight Committee has been so critical to this process, because they have weighed in significantly on how we've priced and budgeted for the bond program.
Thank you very much, and I wanted to say thank you for the Bond Oversight Committee. That's a lot of hard work. I'm happy with what work was done there, and I feel it was productive, and I was able to go to a few meetings, and I felt like it was an open, honest process, and so thanks to admin and all y'all's hard work and transparency and what have you, so.
So Jason, did I hear you saying that you liked the three-phase approach because the smaller amount?
That's
You felt
correct.
that was going to be more comfortable to the community?
That's correct.
And how do you feel now that we've switched from the three-phase to the two-phase? Do you feel that that's doable, or do you feel uncomfortable? And I kind of got the sense that maybe you feel the number where we are now is a little bit too high, but maybe we should all have a discussion about that, because that's an important thing for us to feel, we need to feel confident going forward. Do you
Right.
want to comment on that?
I do. I like the three-phase process because it was a smaller amount initially, and then as we spent our money correctly and we were prudent, I mean, let's face it, we may not have the same board in a few years. They may have a different direction, and I know that we've put processes in place to help that, but my concern is I've felt a little bit of pushback in the community about the amount. And I'm okay with the two-step, but I feel currently right now the amount is just a little bit too much, in my opinion.
Okay.
So I think we need to have some open discussion about it.
Okay, I think that's a fair point. Would anybody else like to comment on that?
Yes, I would like to comment.
All right.
I have my green light on.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rice, I didn't
Well,
see.
I knew you weren't ignoring me. I would like to mention one thing to Jason, and that is one thing we learned from the bond that failed in 2003 is not to hold it on a Saturday in February when the Challenger disintegrated, re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. So having it in November with the general election assures that there'll be the highest voter turnout for that. And I think that's important to give most of the community an opportunity to make their vote heard. So that's one thing we learned. And I think the other thing we learned is, correct me if I'm wrong, Charles, but I believe the Bond Oversight Committee suggested to you that we do it in 2 phases instead of 3, which is why we changed it in the first place. And then, Mr. Bassett, what's the tax implication on the INS tax rate for this new number?
We think we can get this done with a 5-year plan without increasing the tax rate.
Okay, so I would just, my opinion, which I respect yours, Jason, is that with the amount of growth that we're having and the fact that construction costs are increasing so rapidly, that we should try to get as much done as we can, demonstrate fiduciary responsibility to the community, execute the bond program, and then do the next phase or the second phase when this one's finished.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mrs. Bailey?
I have some comments, general comments. I actually agree with Jason. I think that the bond amount is too high. I went to several bond oversight committee members, and they weren't comfortable with the pricing of our new schools. I think Dean and, can comment on that, but one member especially said, "Don't put words in my mouth. I'm not accepting your price. I'm accepting your method." Another bond oversight committee member said, "We know the numbers are wrong." Okay, so we did have dissension on that bond oversight committee that the new construction prices were too high. Also, did we have all 23 members attend all at the same time?
according to my notes, we had 16 was the highest attendance that we had.
And did we have people floating in and out of meetings, considering it was summer, some people on vacation, or?
I would say the representation of the 12 to 13 was very consistent. The 2 to 3 is where we'd have float that either go down or up.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, Ms. Bain.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that I'm with Jason. I would go between a $350 and a $400 million bond, because I think that the community is watching us right now, and we want to make sure that we're being wise and we're being, doing our due diligence, and this is a big decision for the school board, okay? And we've got to get this right. We knew in 2007 those numbers were wrong, and I'm not blaming anyone on that, okay? We don't even know what's going to happen in this district. We know we've had flat enrollment growth. We have pockets of the district that are exploding, and I'm all for new schools in those areas where it's exploding. But I think we have to really look at those construction costs. As I looked at all this backup. I looked even at, had the RS manual for 2014, which didn't change too much from 2013. So I did my due diligence. I've talked to engineers. I think we only had one engineer on the Bond Oversight Committee. And these are engineers that have a college degree in engineering. Some of them have doctorates. Some of them work on big construction contracts. Some of them have even given expert testimony in legality issues when reconstructing a school or anything from a disaster. So all of them have said, these prices are too high. And frankly, they kept changing from meeting to meeting. And the bond committee, bless your heart, you got those handouts the same day. And so they didn't have the opportunity to study them, to do their due diligence. And I felt sorry for them, kind of, now you know what it's like to be a board of trustee board. So I don't think that was very fair to them. There's other issues I have, and I thank the bond committee, because I think y'all raised some really excellent points. Everybody did. But as far as I'm concerned with the community, I'm going with a smaller bond amount, 350, 400, somewhere in there, just like we had in our phase 1, just because we're just inflating these construction costs. And I don't feel comfortable with that right now. I'm seeing bids come into HISD. That's about 23 million total cost. So where are we coming up with some of these 35 mil? And we have a lot of inflation factored in, and to me, that's a non-persuasive argument. So I guess is when I am very uncomfortable with this amount.
Okay, so a couple of things I heard were pricing of school construction, so probably we need a conversation about that, but maybe we can get everything listed out of what we want to talk about. I heard some questions on the tax rate assumptions, and what was involved in that. Do we have other things would like to hear about that we could add to the list, so we can kind of do this in an organized way, is what I'm thinking. Yes, Mrs. Toussaint.
So just to throw my 2 cents in, so that we can add to the list.
This is what this is all about.
That's right. And I sent this to admin before, letting them know that I wasn't comfortable with the excess of $500 million. At the last meeting that we had, Mr. Rice and I think he threw out a general question, Dr. Dupree, of, is the board comfortable with this number? And that was the 494 million number is where we were at. And I at least recorded that Mr. Rice and I expressed that yes, we were comfortable with the number because we transitioned from the 3 phases to the 2 phases, and we felt like that was reasonable. bumping up the extra 43 million, I can't say now that I'm comfortable with it, getting above that 500 million threshold. Maybe it was just something in my mind, but I just feel like that we're asking a lot. My comments would be, I don't have a problem going with the 2 phases. I think that was the recommendation of the Bond Oversight Committee. I think it was, it was a fine recommendation. I'm happy to support that recommendation, and because of that, it's necessarily going to mean a higher bond in phase 1. And I'm also not uncomfortable with the changing amount, because I think it's a work in progress, and when you do a work in progress in public, then you're going to see every single little bitty change and everything that happens. So I'm not uncomfortable with the changing of the numbers. I might question, I do question, and I guess this is on the list, of why we're still on the top side of the per square foot, even when comparing with other districts. We're still on the top side. And I have some concern about being on the top side, plus putting in the inflation, plus putting in the contingency, and now so I don't have a high level of comfort with that. I still feel like it's a little on the padded side. So that would be my first comment about the numbers. So getting some response to why we're on the top side, and why we're including some of that, and if we're not double dipping maybe, would be good for me. I will say that another thing that makes me feel comfortable with the 2 phases, Jason, over the 3, and kind of going with a little bit higher number, is that we've discussed the bond resolution language, and we're going to get to that, I know, later, but in my mind, they're hand in hand, because that's safeguards, I feel like. And I have some suggestions on even some other things we can put in there that I feel like might give us even a higher level of comfort. But if we build in some of those safeguards, then if we have padded a little more than, if we've... Necessary. Then a little more than necessary, then that money can be spent to either pay down debt or work on some phase 2 projects, or something along those lines, then I would probably feel more comfortable with that. Another set of numbers that I would just throw out there, because I did some looking at the bond election history also. One of the things I'd like to get, Steve, is, and I'm sure you've provided this before, and it's not something I put my hands on, but I'm sure we have a debt retirement plan. I'd like to see what that looks like and see how much of the 1982, 1984, 1991 debt that we have not paid yet, because in my mind, and I'm sure I think in very simplistic terms, but it makes a difference to me if we've paid off some of that older debt before we start asking again, for a lot more, number one. Number two, when I looked at the bond election history, we increased our request between 2003 and 2007. We asked for $128 million, roughly more, between the 03 and 07 bonds, which was a 4-year period, and we had a student increase of 8,000. We're now asking for $104 million more, which is less after a 7-year period, but we only have about 3,000 more students. So just in my mind, crunching numbers, I had to ask, it seems that growth has slowed a little bit, and I know I've seen all the numbers. I was on the, part of the demographic stuff. But, that factors in for me, is that maybe we're reaching a little too high at this point. And I'm with Ms. Bailey we've got to build the schools, and we've got to, technology infrastructure is, I think, critical. So I'm supportive of that, but I'm still not comfortable with where we are on the number.
Okay, I think I'm hearing a lot of the same things, so Mr. Rosenthal, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, in general, I am supportive of the bond, and I do like the idea of the two-phase, in case the projections really do pan out, which is always a concern. Back in 2007, we were kind of in similar boom times, and then things kind of changed. And nobody in this room knows what's going to happen. We can say we have a crystal ball, but it's kind of opaque. Your concern about the bond repayment thing, I just got an email today asking me how much current debt we have. And so that is on the minds of people. I would also agree that I think that the numbers are too high. In 2007, it was, as Mr. Burdine, which one is it? You go by, Jason.
That's Justin.
Justin, right?
I'll read and say, yeah.
Justin.
Justin's good.
It's an inside joke that only about, what, 5,000
Well, I
people
think,
heard?
yeah, only a few.
Anyway, so we authorized $428 million, of which 365 were issued, because we still have the 63 million unissued. Of that, we had about $30 to $34 million left over. And I know we've discussed what was used as contingency back then. I don't know if you've been able to dig that up since we discussed that, but obviously, whatever they were using, was way too much. And I arrived at that $30 to $34 million because right now we have 22 to 24 million left over. And I put in 8 to 10 million that we spent of that bond money on iPads. So we would have had an extra 8 to 10 million. That's almost 10% over. And I really don't want to end up with numbers like that. So if they were using 17% contingencies, they probably should have only used 7 to 8% contingencies. I think that the reason that I'm bringing that up is because that 2007 bond, it's a valid database. They had a whole assortment of projects, probably very similar to what we're going to encounter. And you're always going to find projects that come under and some that go over. I get that, but I think that's a good database to have. And so whatever they used obviously was too much. And I also think that some of these prices on the construction are, I think they're too high. And I know you don't necessarily like the comparisons to Katy, but I think $42,000 per, or whatever, $35,000 per seat, that we're going to be using out all the way to elementary 49, and $41,000 per seat, almost 42, projected for elementary 51, 5-6 years down the road. Again, we don't have a crystal ball, it just seems bloated. And we will have some safeguards with some of the resolutions that we've been discussing, but then again, those can be overridden too, because all 7 of us aren't going to be there.
Right, a new group. Okay, so, KP, you want to comment, and then I'll summarize and direct some questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of good discussion going on, and I agree with Dave saying, first of all, I think since each phase or each time you go with a bond, there is a cost attached to it, to market it or, run the election and all that stuff. So considering that, and also, at least a couple of people on the bond oversight committee I had discussions with, and I have a whole lot of respect for their judgment because we are not an expert in everything. So the two-phase recommendation is something I support. But at the same time, I agree with Jenny, I agree with Dave. I think our
valuation or our cost evaluation is too high. And you have to find ways to, bring it down, because I see we could, of course, we are talking about construction, we are talking about, when it comes to all our business, I think we pay too much on a lot of things. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, we are spending our tax dollars, so we have to be cautious about that. And a couple of things I wanted to bring the good side of it, at least we are not it's not going to increase our tax rate, which is a good thing. Once again, I absolutely raise my concern about pricing factor and also increasing that dollar amount, 52,000 more, which is, I think, if we find a way to get around that, we could come up with this number somewhere around 500 million rather than 542, and which is, in my opinion, I think it is a much better number, presentable number. Okay, when we're talking about 500 or 542, and I understand it's not a percentage-wise, maybe it is not a big difference, but it is $42 million you're talking about. That's a lot of money. And and obviously we wanted to go, obviously we all are checking, one of the reasons we wanted to do this bond, and we wanted to catch up with what we need to do. And obviously, I was talking to some people and reading something. Of course, our neighboring school districts, all of them are, doing bond, so to catch up with, or accommodate their growth. And we should be so thankful we are growing. And obviously, we need to accommodate that. So, bottom line, I believe I agree with bond process, issue process. But at the same time, this pricing, I share the same concern. We have to go back and look how we can do a better job.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we have a consensus that the two-phase concept is okay. We understand the increase in the amount because of the two phases. So we're comfortable with that, but we feel like at this point, when we're at the 542 number, that's feeling a little high to us, and perhaps the root of that comes from the pricing of the construction costs that are there. So, Dr. Dupree, do you think some of your team could give some explanation of that, of how we got to these numbers that we got to, and the justification for them as they are?
Well, is it really necessary to justify it again? I mean, we've given you extensive justification for it. Because what's really a question here, to be honest, is our judgment. Because we have used, and again, do not hear me being defensive. We're here we want your support in getting a bond out here, because we need a bond for this community. And the bottom line is, if the board feels like it's too high and the pricing is too high, then we can pull back on that. We are higher than the area average, and we did that intentionally. We've explained those reasons in writing to you. We discussed them at length with the Bond Oversight Committee, and they center around the fact that Fort Bend has not been a good client, and we're not getting aggressive pricing from our vendors. That's been seen again and again. But that's really all beside the point. If we have the board who we're asking to approve this believe that it's too high, then we need to bring it down. The risk we bear in doing that is that at some point in the future, we will not have the money available to complete all of them. And if that happens, then it happens. I mean, the risk, you can't have it both ways. If you're going to budget and you're going to try to cover all of your costs and have appropriate contingencies, then the risk is you might have a little bit too much budgeted. And if you feel like the community is sensitive to the number, and you are, as a board, are sensitive, then we can lower the price to the area average, get this closer to 500 million, and then if you all feel like that's a fair number, we go forward, and at some point in the future, Lord willing, we'll be right on, and it'll be perfect, and you all were right, and we were all right, and it's a winner, and we build all those schools, and there's no issues, but we might end up short on one or two of the schools later. And if that happens, we have another bond, or we just modify the plan. I mean, everything we're doing, as you know, is it's all moving. Our demographic data is moving. All of our planning is subject to annual evaluation anyway. So if that's a sensitivity area that's going to cause you to not be able to support this, then we are very comfortable moving the pricing down and getting it closer to the 500 million, probably even a little under 500 million. The other option we have is to pull a school or two out of it. I would not suggest doing that, because that is that's a greater risk. That gets us in a situation where, because I believe the growth is going to come. You know, the numbers, everything, as Mr. Rosenthal mentioned, blew up when the economy fell apart. And that's why, I mean, it's rapidly, I mean, we're still on track. Jason, you read some numbers. We're still on track for that 85,000 by 2023. 2008 and 2009 threw us off track, but we're rapidly catching up, and we're projected, and we're going to get there. So I think we need the schools we have in here. But so if pricing is the issue, then let us recalculate it at, now this is where I want your perspective, because we have one more go at this next week. You know, by 11:59 p.m. next Monday, we need to call this election if we're going to call it. And so I want to make sure we get it right. And so if you look at the data we provided you earlier, I think that the area average is, Steve, what is the area average that we were comparing to?
Oh, it was...
Construction only?
230.45, right?
No, construction only?
182.
Okay, yeah, it was 182.
182. That's, so we're right now pricing at
187.
187, so we bring it down $5 a square foot. I mean, does that feel better to the board? I mean, that's right, we need...
Okay, so thank you for commenting. So let's clarify here. What is the board's expressed concern? Let's clarify what that is. Is the concern with the number, the bottom line number? Is the concern with the assumptions within the number, i.e. the construction cost? And I think that's what we need to decide. If we feel that as a group, okay, we understand these assumptions and we don't agree with them, but they are the assumptions pursuant to this number, and then we can have that conversation. If it's the number that we want at the end that we're not comfortable with, then we need to have a conversation around, we need to formulate this plan to this number. So what is the board's comments on that?
Well, I would just ask the board to consider this as we're moving forward. Whatever the board votes to do is, of course, what we will do. But we need to be careful when we're looking at the program costs for a new elementary school or middle school, to separate that, to understand the difference between the program cost and the construction cost. The program cost carries our soft costs for professional fees, surveys, that sort of thing, as well as furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, FF&E. And I think normally it's just expressed in terms of program dollars. I haven't been to any of the bond oversight committee meetings, and I don't know how you have been expressing it. Have you been expressing it that way, Mr. Cleaver? As a program cost per square foot?
Yes, sir. We have a construction cost, and then that's rolled into the Jacobs soft costs model to come out to calculate the program cost.
It's just important to know that when we're looking at that, we have to keep that in mind, so we're not looking at the wrong number. We're looking at a construction number. Secondly, if we do a two-phase program, and that lasts for 5 years, it's absolutely essential to include interest, because costs are going to go up over the next 5 years. And so it's important to carry interest for that. Thirdly, it is important to carry a contingency. Not too much, not too little. How much is right? I would say the amount that's right is to make sure we don't run out of money before we complete all the projects we promised the public we were going to build. And lastly, if we find ourselves in a place where we didn't spend all the money and we have excess money left over, that money can't be spent on anything else without board approval. So it's not a slush fund for the superintendent or the administration to go build a pet project. It's not. It requires board approval. That money could also be used as seed money for phase 2, or it could be used to pay down So I just want us to, I know everybody's got sticker shock. I bought a Suburban in 1985, and the sticker price was brand new, $17,000. And I kept that car 6 years, had 150,000 miles on it, and I went to buy a new one in '91, and they were $27,000. And I said, what? Chevrolet doesn't want me to buy a Suburban anymore. But because of the economy in Houston, construction costs have escalated sharply, and they're going to be high for at least the next 5 years. Mr. Rosenthal is correct. We don't have a crystal ball. But I believe that Dr. Dupree is correct. In 2010, that's an anomaly. The economy faltered. We didn't get the student growth that we thought we were going to get. But we've been working on this for the last 18 months. We've brought in a demographer from College Station. All the projections for Fort Bend County, the county, as well as the school district, the county's going to double it's projected to double in population over the next 20 years, maybe less than that now. So I think that we're on track. Again, I would just ask you to consider those points. Whatever the board decides to do, whether we go to 400 million or whatever, but think about this. If we do it in 2 bites, and we lower the cost now, the cost for phase 2 is going to be even higher. So I think what they're asking for is kind of the best of both worlds to even it out. That's all I would like for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Okay, so let's talk about the number. Mr. Rice, I'm gathering that you're comfortable with the 542 number. You feel that's a reasonable
538.
I'm sorry.
Yes, we
You know, I would have to say this. I'm going to rely on Dr. Dupree and Mr. Cleaver and Mr. Bassett. They've been taking bids. They've been looking at this stuff. At this point, that's all I can do. We have to ask questions and make good decisions, good informed decisions. We do have to question, and we do have to be cognizant of the fact that whatever we borrow, we have to pay back. But I think we've made good progress on that so far. To date, we've got a Standard & Poor's AA+ bond rating. We're one of like 4 or 5 districts in the state with a bond rating that high. We're continuing to grow, and we need to take firm, decisive action based on the best information we have available to us. And I think we have to rely on our staff. So today I would say yes, but please don't increase it again.
Okay, thank you. What other comments do we have?
I wanted to answer, your question initially is whether we were happy with the bottom line. To me, the bottom line is my concern. I'm fully supportive of building new schools. I don't have a problem with coming back and asking for another bond in 4 or 5 years. I'm okay with that. So the bottom line is what concerns me. I think that we can work with that. I mean, 380 million plus 107 is roughly $500 million. If we need more, let's come back and ask for more, and I'm supportive of that, so.
Okay.
And I agree, and plus, I mean, we have a tech ed center in there too, but I guess I'm not here to go into the weeds with how we price these. I don't even want to go there. I'm just more with the overall amount of bond, and I'm with Jason. We have 380 plus 100 million. That's a half a billion. We have not even done zoning yet. So that's got to be factored in too. And I realize there's pockets for new schools, but there's also zoning that needs to be done too.
Okay. Yes, Mr. George.
I agree with Jason and Ms. Bailey. I think it should be somewhere around 500. And I think, like Jason said, we are going to do another bond anyway in 5 years or so, and, why not we come back and ask for, after we finish doing a very good job? I don't think community is going to say, you cannot do this. So I feel comfortable in around 500 or below 500, and I agree with both of you, and also bottom line is important, and also I again reiterate my concern about the pricing. I think we need to look into it, and I'm not judging the experts' effort, and of course, like Mr. Rice said, we have to rely on our administration for all this information, because I'm not an expert. I understand what is a bond is, but all the details. So we are relying on them about this issue, but around 500, that sounds very good, and we could always go back and ask. And then, we already did a good job, community will accept that. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm hearing a consensus of a comfort with a certain number of 500 million. And so the way I understand this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that I hear there's two ways that we can go about that. We can either eliminate projects as they are priced currently in the program, in the spreadsheet, or we can look at the assumptions we've made, or assumptions that you've presented to us in the pricing of school construction, because the numbers based on these number of projects, you've brought that all together, and it's given us the number of 538 million. And I'm lost about where to go next, but I'm just, that's the crossroads where we are. Is that correct? Is that what everybody is understanding?
Yeah, so I would just, first of all, I wanted to say something about the slush fund, because that's been brought up for a few of our meetings. And I would like to just go on record saying that I don't assume that this administration is going to use extra money as a slush fund. I think the concern has to do with past. It doesn't have to do with this administration. So I would want to go on record as saying that I don't think that that's going to happen. I think the reason for the resolution is mainly for the community's comfort, that this board that's sitting here now is taking steps to be sure that what has happened in the past just won't happen again. Not that we're making any assumptions that it will. So I just wanted to make that statement, because I don't believe that that's going to happen. But I think putting the resolution out there will give a level of comfort to some people that lived it. So that being said, I appreciate, Mr. Rice, you saying what you did about construction versus soft costs, because that was helpful for me. I understood that we were adding, that the total cost per square foot included those soft costs, but I guess maybe I have a little bit of confusion, because, the difference between the average, the 182 and 187 is $5, but between 130 and 142 is $12, so it's significantly higher. So I would make that comment first of all. So that means that obviously our soft costs are higher than the average. The other comment I would just make about that is that the average is 182, but it's because we have Goose Creek that's 203, that's significantly higher. So that sort of skews things in my mind a little bit. So that it kind of makes the 187 a little on the high side. So that would just be my observation. I don't necessarily think we need to be at 176. I don't know, and I'm with Mr. Rice. I trust your judgment. That's just an observation I'm making about those numbers, that you've provided for us. So I don't know that I don't think we should necessarily take projects out of the bond. But I do think that I at least feel that we have some room to lower the cost per square foot, and maybe I think I would support that more than taking entire projects out of the bond. And then the final thing I would say is that I really do, my perspective on it really is the sticker shock issue. I don't necessarily have, with the exception of the comments I just made, I don't have, I understand that you guys do this, and that I understand your rationale, and I understand the steps that you took to get us here. But I think exceeding $500 million from speaking to those in the community, and it's just going to be asking a lot. So, yes, those would be my comments.
Okay, that's great, that's great. Any other comments? So what I'm gathering is we kind of have three paths. We've gone from 2 to 3 now.
Wait, that's like the bond.
Yeah, I learned from you. No, don't let me say things I regret later. We can keep the current projects, and we can lower the assumptions in dollars.
Do you mind if I address that? Because that's the important piece about that is when we last spoke about the 494, and Steve, tell me if I'm wrong, that 494 was based on the same number of schools at 2013 pricing. So by simply aging the pricing to 2014 pricing, it's going to go over 500 million. So we are, I believe, with certainty, if we're going to get below 500 million, we will have to remove at least a couple of projects, 2 schools or more. So is that, that's really, we will have to affect the project list. So are you good with that? You need to.
Right, so that.
Are you all giving us guidance?
Dr. Dupree, we're like tag teaming this, because number 2 on my list of options is less projects.
That's right.
And then number 3 is the status quo of the current projects and the current assumptions. And then I would tie that, as has been brought up by a couple of people, with strong resolution, strong guidance, whatever, on funding and what happens with contingency funds, I guess is the only thing I can
And so,
add to that.
if you don't mind, I'll address that, because I do think there's something I need to say very pointedly to the board. And that is, we would not have brought this forward for your consideration if we did not feel like it was a solid proposal that we could communicate effectively and help this community rally around in support of. You have to know, like you, we're also at risk in this whole thing. And so there's many risks. It's putting one out there that's too big that they won't approve. It's under budgeting and then not being able to finish the projects we promised. It's over budgeting and having contingency out there that, that people might think we're going to use inappropriately. That's probably the one that's easiest to protect against with all the measures you're wanting to put in place, and we're supportive of all of those things. But this is, you have to know, this isn't a wish list. It's not, this is well thought out. And if members of the committee really feel like the committee process has not been effective and that we didn't take their guidance and they didn't have a voice, then they need to let us know that. They should make that known during the committee process, not only after the meeting. We should hear that from the committee members as well. It's good for us to know that, but we've spent hours and hours with these committee members. This isn't a couple of times. They've met numerous times. And so in the end, we're here with a recommendation we believe is sound. But again, we're here to work with the board. That's why, and it's easy to negotiate these things and to bring it down. We just all have to understand the risks associated with that and where we could be in a few years. And if that's palatable to you, then it's fine. It's palatable to us as well, and we'll proceed, and we're good. We just need to really understand what your direction would be. And we asked them to the table, and they haven't had a chance to speak.
I know, because we keep talking amongst ourselves, so we rarely get to speak amongst ourselves, Mr. Harrington.
Well, you were having great dialogue there. I certainly didn't want to interrupt it. Let me try to summarize the committee. The committee, from a consensus standpoint, believes admin's presented a proposal that has certainly a rational basis to it. one of the things that we have blessed with in our community is we've got a wide range of skill set in there, including our construction folks. And John Knoll was here earlier. I don't know if he's left, but...
He stepped out.
Okay, if we've got any others that want to opine on this. One of the things that I heard that was really interesting to me is, the planning cycle for I don't want to say healthy school districts, but districts that are growing and continually stay on the hunt in terms of meeting their facilities obligation is they're usually on a 3-year planning cycle. We're really stretching out here beyond the 3-year, and it gets very hard to predict in an environment like we have now what in the world these costs are going to be. And so I just want to make sure that there was a feel that the committee somehow was refuting what the admin had put together. They were saying it has a rational basis, and some of these things, especially when we get out in the deep end of the planning area, are difficult to really grapple, and we certainly understand why admin would adopt the position they've adopted. The other thing I heard from some of our committee members, and Charles, interject if I'm misstating this, is as a school district, because we really haven't stayed on the hunt in terms of working our program, Fort Bend ISD has not refined a lot of its processes like some other school districts where they can effectively punch out. I think you made the example of Max's position in an adjacent school district. I mean, they've been there 20 years. And so, the only way you get better at something is if you're doing it continuously. And, as a school district, we kind of, put the fire out for a period here where we didn't really stay on the facilities development side. And I think that contributes to maybe some of the angst. I certainly can appreciate, and I know, speaking for other members of the committee chime in here, admin's the one that's got to go execute this. I mean, they're the ones with trying to go out and deliver in an environment. And so I just wanted to clarify that there was some, broken arrow concepts. I can certainly appreciate the board members providing some guidance on where they feel things are, but the Bond Oversight Committee in no way was refuting what admin had put together. I mean, it was a rational proposal, so.
And if I might add, I was one of the gentlemen, maybe the only gentleman, that said the numbers were wrong. And it was a tongue-in-cheek comment. I work for Fluor, and I'm in the industry, and I'm an accountant. And when anything hits a spreadsheet and is saved, it effectively becomes wrong. I also served on a 2007 and a 2011 bond committee as a co-chair, and we were very confident coming into that bond committee that we had a solid bond. And I still believe that. The economy changed. That drove a lot of things. One of the things we talked about in the committee, if we wanted to assure price, we have to have the guts to build during a recession. That's where you get the best pricing. That's tough to do from a bond standpoint. So where it came from a floor perspective, or from a contractor's perspective, is what the owner's appetite is for risk. And we're the owners, the community. That's where contingency comes in the pricing, where we try to normalize it, or the administration try to normalize it. And to Don's point, we felt comfortable with the rationalization behind that.
Thank you for sharing that. Mr. Rice, did you have a comment? Or? No.
No.
You would like to interject something?
Just wanted to address a couple of things we were listening to on, okay, if we go to this, Max and I are uncomfortable with keeping the number, right below 5 without changing projects, and here's really why. If you look at that original estimate for July 17th, that total amount was $205 million, okay? And that was what we had at the top of that one sheet that you have with new construction for the 494, okay? The $205 million was that estimate. So that total cost, that all-in cost per square foot was $217, and that $217 included the full 16% contingency. If you compare that $217 down here to Cy Fair at $232, Lamar at $242, we'll talk about Katy in a minute, I mean, that is significantly below, and Cy-Fair, I mean, that's a machine in terms of punching schools out. Okay, so I mean, they're definitely somebody, we want to look at. So we were very uncomfortable with that 217, which is where we're at. Addressing just some of the other comments, if you think about...
Can I clarify something here, Mr. Bassett? So what you're saying is in the 494 number, which was the July number, you were using a 217 construction cost, and that's what got us to that 494 number?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And is that an all-in number?
That's an all-in.
Kids in the chairs?
Yes.
Yeah, that 217 was program cost. Construction cost was 152.48.
Okay, but that's the total all in. Okay.
Right.
So, and I have a question. So have you guys crunched the numbers if we used, let's say, the 232? If we went down and used a Lamar or a Cy-Fair number, well, Lamar's the same, but if we used the Cy-Fair number or the Katy number?
Well, let me address that if you don't mind. So just before we go into that green box, just talking a little bit about the blue box and why we use that. Now, Goose Creek is in there, and while you could say, I mean, it's an outlier, the thing about it is for Cy-Fair, Lamar, and Katy and Houston, all those amounts are planning numbers that we got from those, I got from those CFOs. The Goose Creek, I couldn't get from their CFO, but that 203 is actual, and those are actual amounts based on their 2003 bids, and so they're actual. And also, I think they're a bit more valid than the Katy and Cy-Fair because those are closer to our square footage. See, the larger the square footage that you have, the lower your cost should be on a per square footage basis, because you're spreading your core, the core of your school in terms of library and gym and cafeteria, you're spreading that out over more kids. And so that's why, you really looking in that comparison between Cy-Fair and Katy, our size is a lot closer to Lamar, and so that's why I felt better about the Lamar total cost per square footage on the 242. And so that was just to give you a little bit of perspective. The construction cost per square foot, our average compared to the other districts, 187 to 182. I mean, that's just an increase of 2.7%. It's a small percentage increase. Then lastly, to address the concerns on contingency, and I can appreciate everybody's concerns on that, especially when you compare 2007. Unfortunately, the data that we have on 2007, I mean, isn't really great. And we don't have all of the history here. The CFO that was in place was, Tracy was before Tracy. Okay, so she wasn't able to help on that. But you think about even those numbers, and I'm not going to worry too much about how they were calculated, but what happened right after that bond passed? I mean, with 18 months, I mean, the economy went south. I mean, we were in the catbird seat when it came to construction. We were able to build things. We were definitely able to come in under budget. It's a very different environment in terms of comparing the 2007 bond and the contingency to what we could be facing here over the next 5 years. And the folks that were involved in construction in the last group, I mean, we talked to them about the Katy inflation assumptions of the 8%, the 8%, the 5%, and they said, yeah, they do not see things slowing down. They don't see a plateau anywhere in the near future. And so that's while that contingency amount, even bringing it down to the 11%, people could say is high. We weren't comfortable sticking with what we have on the project list because we know 5 years from now we're going to be held accountable to it. So.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yeah, Steve, I appreciate your concern here about dropping some projects. I guess I want to mention, I really do not want to go in the weeds, but I will mention in the Chronicle, there was an article about cost comparisons for school districts between 2007 and 13. We were the highest at 150 square feet. I don't know what kind of schools we're building. Like I said, I wasn't on the board in 2007. but it seems like Fort Bend is just kind of following past tradition here on the high side. Also, there was an probably Jim knows this, an HISD, one recent elementary school bid came in at like 24 million. I think it was the Sam White elementary school. That one is going to go, it's under construction now, and it's still below. So if we have to drop some projects, then we drop them. And maybe we drop the Tech Ed Center, because I don't see us moving forward on our Tech Ed program yet. So maybe that gets thrown into phase 2. We keep the elementary schools in phase 1.
Or maybe we just start phase 2 a little sooner, start at least talking about it, instead of waiting 5 years. Let's start talking about it in 3 years. We'll have more experience under our belt here. We'll see how things are going. We'll see how the demographics are really trending, how they're fitting the model. I mean, because that's what, you guys were saying is, that's typically what school districts are doing. They're on more of it's been 7 years, it'll be almost 8 years, well, no, 7 years. So that's a long time, and, so maybe we want to take the stuff that's out at 2018 and 20 and kind of, maybe one of them, trim that off and start the process up in 3 years with maybe another proposal to the voters in 4 years instead of 5 or 6. And that way they see, okay, they're doing as promised, there's some protection for the taxpayers, and that way we don't have to sit there and argue about, well, is it 244 or 200 and whatever, because none of us really know. We know what 46 is going to cost, but other than that, we really don't know.
Right. Thank you, Dave. Kristen?
So I think I agree with that, because that was going to be my next question, is which projects would come off? I guess we would need to look at what the outliers are. If we're going to go out for a phase 2 bond anyway, and I wouldn't necessarily feel uncomfortable doing that a little sooner. We're going to do it anyway. If we show the community that we've managed our money and built our schools and been diligent and gotten the zoning and the feeder patterns taken care of and some of the concerns that have been expressed in the community, then it may even be a lot easier to go back out for more than what we would have wanted. With regard to the CTE, when we discussed, because I raised this question about the center with the Texas, with partnering with other resources. So I think we said that would be more of a placeholder and not necessarily a building. Okay, so I just wanted to confirm that, because, I agree that I don't know that we're necessarily going to build a building, but I do understand that we may need some funding for space for even the colleges that we'll partner with. Is that correct? Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that since Jenny brought it up. But, yeah.
Mr. George?
I agree with Dave, and I agree with what Kristen is saying. I think it is a very good idea, because we already have a 15, 20-year plan in place, or we know what to expect up to a certain extent, even though we don't know what is going to happen. So I feel like going back in 3 or 4 years, by then we have a track record. And also in the past, we have to consider one factor. In 2007, there was no, in 2003 for that matter, there was no plan in place, okay, what is happening 15 or 20 years to this district. They just went with one bond and one, that's it. But here we are not talking about that. So what is, I don't understand, or this is my question, what difference it really truly make, when we do a good job and go back before even we finish with 5-year plan, asking for more money, if we did a phenomenal job with the money we are already collected from the public. And I completely agree with that. And that might be a much better idea moving forward. That's what I feel.
I would just like to point out, we don't have a 15 or 20-year plan, we have a 10-year plan. And we can go out in 4 years, but now we're going to be back to a 3-phase bond program, not a 2, which is that's fine, because it's a fallacy to think you can do a reduced plan now and then do another plan in 4 years that's going to be the same or less than what we're doing now. So when we say we're for a 2-phase program, but we're going to go out in 4 years, we're really not for a 2-phase program, we're for a 3-phase program, which is okay. But let's not fool ourselves into thinking we're going to get it done in 2 bites, because it's going to be 3.
Well, that's possible. I guess the only way it could be 2 phases is if the second phase was a lot larger than the first phase, because we'd be doing the 1/3, 2/3, or the 3/8, 5/8 concept.
Well, yes, of course it would. But my question, I'm just trying to understand, why would we do that? Why would we go for something bigger than what we're even asking for now in phase 2? If we're uncomfortable with that now, we'll be uncomfortable with it in the future. So there's nothing wrong with the 3-phase plan, but that was the recommendation of the bond committee, which is why Dr. Dupree changed it in the first place. But it's the board's prerogative. If we go for 3-phase, we go for 3-phase. But that's the reality of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Also, what you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be, that much smaller, so then the second phase wouldn't have to be that much larger. But I guess it's the same reason why, people invest in short-term, investments, or bonds, because they don't want to lock their money away, not knowing what the future holds, so I think there's just, maybe that's part of it.
Well, the other comment I would make is that if we're not feeling that the community wants something this big right now, then whether we go out for a 2-phase or a 3-phase is really irrelevant. And I might disagree a little bit, because I think that if we do have a track record in place of using our money wisely, like Mr. George and Mr. Rosenthal said, then it might be easier to go get the phase 2 bond bigger than the phase 1 bond, because then we've proven that we've used it the way we said we were going to use it, unlike we've done previously, and we've put the safeguards in place, and we've done things differently this time. So we've proven our track record, and it might be easier to go back out and get that second bond, a little bit larger. The plan stays the same. I mean, we do have the plan, where the community's vetted the plan. I think now it's just a matter of listening to the community, taking their temperature, seeing what they're willing to do, because regardless of whether, we call the bond or not, ultimately it's their decision, and if, so.
Can you comment? Your green light's on, it's been on for a while.
It has. I had a few comments along the way, but about 10 minutes ago, I just...
You want me to get you a glass of iced tea or anything? You can pass, because Mr. George has his green light on, then we can come back to you. All right, go ahead, Mr. George.
No, I again stick with what we all, I agree with these things, and, I don't think, again, it's my personal opinion, I don't think it make a big difference. We go what size of a bond we go the second phase. If we did a phenomenal job, I don't think that matters, really. Or it's going to be 500 or 600 at that point. Because, going back to our track record is the issue here, and what we did in 2007, and why we are still sitting on money, and or that kind of stuff is, again, that's all in the past. It is nothing to do with the new administration. I understand it.
Right.
But coming from a financial background, I see that, your track record matters, like, so, again, maybe I'm repeating, so.
I think we're all sort of, maybe I think we're here, I mean, I'm kind of hearing a consensus here that, I don't know, do you have I guess I know what I'm hearing is that we're more comfortable in the 500 number. I'm hearing, and I don't know that we know how to get to that number, but I also think we feel that way because of the perception to that the community may have on our ability to execute projects in a timely way and all of those things. I think we have some concerns about past assumptions that have been made and all of those things which have added to our conversation about our pricing and our contingencies and all of that. Well, what I've heard is that we kind of need to stick with those numbers because, number one, we don't have that good of a reputation, and number two, we're looking out far enough into the future that where the market becomes more and more uncertain, and as we factor in inflation, the numbers compound. So I'm hearing the contingency numbers are, they're a guess and they're our best guess, and so that's kind of what we have to work with. I think the board feels that they're a little bit high, but we're not the experts, so I guess we have to sort of swallow that. Do we want to stick with, I don't know where to go from here. Dr. Dupree, do you want to comment first?
I just wanted to follow up on that. Do we know what is that second phase number going to be? Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
No.
So my question is, what difference it make? At that point, it come out as 600 maybe or 700. We don't know that. So we only know what is going to happen right now. So we're all talking about we don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, or we have no idea. Mm-hmm. So why we wanted to plan for something? The second phase might be larger. I don't know, or I don't see why it is a big problem. We are concerned about, we wanted to have a smaller second phase. I don't know. At that point, maybe we don't have any control. We have to go back to the public asking for much more money.
And by then, we have a revised 10-year plan, which is the following 10 years, and so it all is a moot point.
It doesn't make, in my opinion, it doesn't make any big difference whether it is,
Dr. Dupree, do you have?
So here's where I'm at. And so you can, I'll kind of outline a plan, and you can tell me, and we have a couple of committee members, you all might even weigh on this, but one of the things we've talked about at the committee was that there are 3 ways to address growth. You look at your boundaries, you can do building additions, like we have budget in here, or you can build some new buildings. Those are really the 3 ways. You can bring in portables, but that's not the desirable. That's the transitionary, temporary way. I think based on the conversation I'm hearing tonight, again, this is where I need you to kind of vet what I'm about to say. I would tomorrow ask Steve and Max to pull elementary 50 and 51 off of this list, leaving the projections for the other schools where they are because we feel like the projections are sound. That takes us well below 500 million. You'd be taking 538 million and deducting 64 million from that. We still have the building additions. We'll be doing boundaries, as Ms. Bailey mentioned. We still need to feel what that impact is going to be to do the boundaries. I believe building additions are much more economical in many cases than a new school. So we have the capacity then to build 3 new schools, which we kind of know where we think those need to go. We have the capacity to build classroom additions to bridge for as we continually refine our planning, and then for another bond, whether it's in 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years. I think with the 3 elementary schools, classroom additions, and the boundary work the board is going to do, we have the capacity to manage growth for the next 3, 4, or 5 years. That would be my recommendation based on this conversation.
Which planning area are elementary schools 50 and 51? And refresh my memory.
Max, which schools are 50 and 51 in?
is, one is the south part of the district.
Planning area C?
One's planning area C and one's planning area A, I believe.
Dr. Dupree?
Max, put your microphone up, microphone.
I'm sorry, I think I'm on. Max and I were conferring, and we would suggest, as opposed to dropping 50 from the plan, perhaps dropping the third year of the life cycle cost, which would be the 16 million that we added before, okay? That would, if we took out 51 and life cycle 3, that would drop the total by 51.5 million. And then what I would say about 51, if the year needed is 1920, if we do have a reimbursement resolution in place again, then we'd be able to start on that, in time before the bond. And so we would be in a situation where, if things really did explode, we'd be able to really get started on that significantly before that second election. But that was just something he and I, obviously we didn't have to get a chance to huddle with you, but we're just kind of working the numbers here.
And I like that too, because it's got the 51 is 2019, 2020 on this list, and that, is on the border of our, of our 5 years or whatever.
And which planning area is 51 in?
I believe it's C, but if I could, I'll double check with that and get back with you.
Is this money including the 107 million that we currently have, or excluding it?
No, I mean, this is including, there's other projects being done, but.
It does, the bond, we would know, the 108 million that's available.
Yes, sir.
That is not included in this bond proposal.
That's right.
It would not reduce this number.
Right.
That's taken into account in the capital plan.
Okay.
And then this is what's left for phase one after that.
And also, another question, maybe we are talking about 38 million in excess, but why do we have to take out 2 schools for that purpose? I don't understand.
Well, that's what they were just suggesting, maybe just take out 1 school, and then the life cycle 3, and what did you say the numbers were on that?
16.
About 16 million on the life cycle 3 numbers, so that would be approximately 50-52, which would be in our range.
And that just gives us that extra school and capacity and inventory if we need that.
And let me ask you a question, make sure I understand this. So let's say 50 is currently planned for planning area C, but if we determine that it needs to be in a different location, we're not bound, or in A, we could move it to C or vice versa.
Based on today's demographic projections, which are based on today's boundaries, that's what the order would be. But once the board does boundaries, and then, and then we start doing, as our demographic data comes in and again, that can always change. We can always
Right, and we're getting ready to have an awesome process in place. We're reviewing this every year, and so we're anticipating our needs year, 2, 3 years out, and it's all going to be awesome.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Bassett, I'm sorry, the resolution you were talking about was taking M&O money and moving that into a capital fund, is that what?
No, sir, what I was suggesting is out of the 538 million that we're proposing, taking out elementary 51, which would be a reduction of 35.5, and then also life cycle year 3, that was added when we went from one phase.
Right, I was talking about the reimbursement resolution.
Okay, with the reimbursement resolution, if we have that tool in place in the future.
That's what, I just wanted to clarify, that's what you were
That
talking
would give
about.
us that flexibility to start on a school early if we needed to.
And then reimburse right.
Exactly.
Got it, okay. I just wanted to.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
I just wanted to clarify.
And that would count also in life cycle deficiencies. If we decided there was a life cycle deficiency that we needed to go ahead with, that could also be in the reimbursement.
Absolutely. The current reimbursement resolution in place, if we continue that does give us that kind of flexibility.
And is that something that's renewed yearly, or remind me how that works? The reimbursement resolution, we didn't have an end date on it, I recall, but I didn't know.
I think it stays in place.
Good for about 18 months.
About 18 months, thank you. 18 months for those listening at home. Okay, so do we have consensus on this? I'm seeing, we good? No?
No, that would be inappropriate for a board meeting.
Okay, great. So excellent work. Thank you, everybody, for contributing, and great work. Thanks for thinking. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming tonight and listening more than you were talking, but thank you also for your service on the committee. We appreciate you very much, and we also appreciate those things you did add were very valuable. So I certainly started an understanding of inflation and the compounding thereof. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next item of business is the resolutions, and I believe we have, as I understand it, our council wants to convene with us about that, so we need to go into closed session. And I suspect when we go into closed session, we'll cover the other things that are on our closed session list as well. So proper consultation with our board's attorney. No, sir?
If you want to do the Oversight Committee, while those committee members are here, we could, this one requires closed session.
Okay.
So it's up to you, but
Okay.
Well, what we're talking about is we have two resolutions, one related to the formation of the Bond Oversight Committee, and then the attorney wanted to visit in closed session about the accountability resolution. So I'm just asking, do we want to go ahead and go into closed session now, or do the first one?
We do, Dr. Dupree, we do. We need a break.
Okay, very good, just checking.
Okay, so we're going to do all these closed session items at one go, and then we'll come back for the rest of the things listed.
Please take with you the resolution that's at your place tonight.
And please take with you the papers you've been provided, and we are now convening closed session.